My guest today is Diana Larsen, and if you've ever run a retrospective, there's a pretty good chance you've been influenced by her work. Diana co authored Agile Retrospectives with Esther Derby, which gave teams a framework for learning from their experiences and improving continuously rather than just shouting into the void. She's also the co author of Liftoff, the definitive guide to team chartering, and more recently, Lead Without Blame with co author Tricia Broderick. She's been a key player in the Agile community since 1997, before it was even called Agile, and she's watched it evolve through every wave of hype and backlash and transformation. She really kind of gets the essence of why this was done in the first place and why parts of it are still very relevant today. We dig into why retrospectives so often fail, what it actually takes to start a team well, and she introduces me to some new frameworks. It's a framework called FAST, a scaling approach that emphasizes team self-selection and dynamic organizations. Has a lot of interesting things worth studying. Dinah's perspective is earned. It's practical. It's valuable. I enjoyed so much chatting with Dinah. I could have gone on for hours. This is a little bit of a long one, but I think it's just all really solid gold. So there's a ton of timeless wisdom and industry perspective in this one. So I think we should just get into it. This is Hard-Boiled Software, Episode 2. Diana Larsen. Welcome, Diana Larsen. What a treat to have you on the Hard-Boiled Software podcast. Where are you joining us from today, Diana?
I'm joining from Portland, Oregon, and my home office, where I do things like this and do my writing and things, and as my launching pad for all the things I do elsewhere in the world.
The Diana Larsen HQ. I got awesome.
Yes.
So I've been told that if the sun comes out when you're talking to someone with Portland, don't be offended if they just leave their desk and go wander out. So hopefully you're getting your sun.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. What I'd love to open up with is, you've been part of the Agile movement since it even really had a name, before all the various practices came about. I mean, you were really there at the ground floor. And, I kind of, when you look back on that span of time, what do you think has changed the most and what hasn't? What still rings true about Agile? There's a lot of talk about Agile being dead. I think the rumors of its death are greatly exaggerated in what we're seeing. But, what do you see about how people work together and create software as changing or remaining the same or needing to get back to fundamentals?
Well, a lot has changed. I wouldn't say I was there right from the beginning. I think that happened kind of in the mid 90s, maybe the early 90s, through the OOPSLA community and so on. But I got invited in the late 90s. So it's been that long. And you're right. It was before Agile became named Agile. It was when everybody was still a lightweight method and so on. And the door that I came in through, how I first got introduced to it was through extreme programming. And I attended an event in 1997. I got introduced to a whole bunch of people, many of whom ultimately became Agile Manifesto signers. And I had been doing a lot of work with helping organizations redesign their work processes, primarily high-tech organizations. And some IT, but not mostly IT or software. It's more like high-tech manufacturing. But I had a bunch of experience with organizations who decided that their work processes needed to become cross-functional, self-organizing, team-based work processes. And their leadership needed to understand how their roles were going to change as a result of that, and so on. And so when I met this community, though I hadn't been a part of it up until that point, it it was an easy integration because, my experience had been, well, what does it mean if you're working in teams? And what does it mean if your organization is needing to make this kind of a change and so on and so forth. So I had already been doing team chartering, for instance. And later on, that became more a part of Agile, but it wasn't in the beginning. So yes, I was there at that point, and my dad was a systems analyst. I grew up playing with flowchart templates and
Kind of a nepo baby.
yeah,
Yeah.
I really
Uh,
was. I'd go to work with him on a Saturday and play. I would get the pile of punch cards that nobody needed anymore that I could do things with. Right? They didn't let me touch the other ones, of course. But anyway, so that was an easy integration for me. It felt very much like my home base. And so as I got then invited to speak at conferences and so on, I, it was a smooth transition for me. And the things I've seen a lot of changes in the interim. It's interesting to me that I started, well, partly because after a few years, I got invited to join the Agile Alliance board of directors. And a few years after that, in the early, so maybe the mid 2000s, 2005, 2006, I already, people already started telling me Agile was dead and something needed to happen. And, they should rewrite the manifesto. And I mean, all that stuff started that early. And more recently, I have sort of looked back on all of that, and I've seen that those those comments kind of came in waves from different parts of the community. And in some ways, I think those waves sync up or at least correspond to the diffusion of innovation curves. Like the very early adopters, the pioneers in Agile and lightweight methods, once it started shifting to accommodate the people who were more early adopters, there was some shifts that had to happen, right? Their work conditions were different, so on. And so they started looking at it a little different. They were maybe more attracted to the Scrum stuff than the XP stuff. And and it seems to me like every time there was one of those sort of crossing the chasm moment, crossing the diffusion of innovation curves moments, that's when Agile has been declared dead by whoever was there before.
right. Yep.
And so now lots of people have been there before. And so now we are getting much toward the later majority and laggards, right? And they're recognizing the utility of thinking more in agile or business agility terms, and they're having their effect on how agile is changing. And so everybody before then is all saying agile is dead. So that's one of the things I've noticed. Certainly, technology changes have made a huge difference. I mean, the most obvious one is the change from absolute emphasis only on co-located teams to the technology that you and I are using now, right? The being able to work virtually and remotely and learning to manage differing time zones and different geographic locations and those kinds of things has been a real learning curve. And that's happened just mostly in the last 10 years. I mein, there were people already moving to remote teams before COVID and the lockdown and all that. I mean, Utah Eckstein's book about distributed and diffused teams that came out in the 2010s sometime. And I mean, there were already people looking at these issues, automatic with moving WordPress from open source to a business model with They were already working with remote teams. And there were one of my favorite books from that time is Scott Berkin's book, My Year Without Pants, which is which is an awesome description
Yeah.
of how he worked through his dislike for the idea of remote teams and preference for co-located teams to figuring out that maybe it was going to be an okay way to work after all, with if certain conditions were in place. And that I love you to Eckstein's book, and I really love Scott. And I think together they are really a great picture of what remote work, how we were thinking about remote work in the late 2010s, 20 teens, I guess. Um, and so that's been a huge change. That has been a huge change. And now, of course, there's AI. Before the remote, there was the change in the mobile technologies and the rise of mobile apps and mobile technology. So there have been many, many changes in the last 25 years that have had significant impact on what kind of software, game software, what kind of software are we writing? Why are we writing it? Who's the customer? How do we organize ourselves to do that, which is different if you're writing in software for to be embedded in hardware, or if you're writing something is SaaS software for the web. So, there's been a lot of changes, and what I like is to have seen the Agile community learning our way through it. I mean, the there were numbers of high performing teams when the lockdown came and everybody went remote, or most everybody did, that could not maintain their high performing because that was just such a shock to their systems.
Yeah.
The way they had organized themselves was all around co-location. But there were some teams who made that shift. And they were the ones who weren't locked in, but were still in learning mode, who were
Interesting.
still like, oh, well, this is a new thing we need to learn. Let's get up to speed on this. And what are the best tools that are out there? What kind of communications are we going to need if we're going to write software sitting in our homes? And all those kinds of things. So there have been a lot of changes. I think it's been a real learning experience for the whole community. Some of us have accepted that gladly. Some of us have
Kicking and
gone
screaming.
kicking and screaming. Exactly.
Yep.
But
I hear you. Yeah.
whatever, we all get dragged into the future one way or
Right.
another. So
Right.
nobody
Yeah.
gets to stay in the past. So
No,
yeah,
it's we just
yeah,
get the
yeah,
nostalgia, right? But yeah, it's
right.
so interesting. I feel
Yeah,
like on one hand, I kind of feel fairly hypocritical because I was very unrelenting about co-location and, being an XP nerd, like 100% pair programming. And then eventually ensemble programming came along and, I'm very, very used to that kind of style of immediate feedback and working very closely and almost like collaborating the
yeah,
majority of the day. So, it works and I've learned
yeah,
to incorporate those things, but I'm like, wow, I really held on to that way longer than I maybe could have or should have. On the other hand, it's really, I do get a little bit smug satisfaction from the fact that it seems like the best way to kind of use AI tools is to be work in very small baby steps, articulating the behavior when you want to add, having it kind of, and if that should sound familiar to you as a fellow XPer, right? That's like, if that's the way we're going to get some of those habits in, then great. You know what I mean? It's kind of nice to see those first principle ideas from back in the day still be very evergreen. So I don't know, kind of conflicted on that, but yeah, you're right. Change is nuts lately. It's just so much. Um, you've helped a lot of organizations grow their capacity for learning and reflection. We talked a little bit about kind of like the 90s when we were kind of deciding to do a podcast. We like talked about like the 90s, Peter Senge and like the BA and all those kind of knowledge management learning stuff that was happening. how so being someone I just think of as like someone helping build learning organizations, how do you describe your current focus? Let's zoom ahead to the future, and I'd just love to hear like what's energizing you
Yeah,
now. What are you seeing as levers? Like
right.
where are you
Yeah.
getting gains with the people you're working with?
Well, I'm still energized by, and I realize that I always have been, when I stop to retrospect on my career and I look back and I now, uh, you know, one of the advantage, I was talking with somebody else about this the other day. One of the advantages to getting older is you begin to be able to see patterns and trends that you can't see when you're in the middle of them. I mean, and it just comes with having the luck to stick around long enough for that to happen. And I mean, the trade-off is nouns are sometimes becoming tricky for me. Finding the noun that I wanted to say, but doesn't at the
Okay.
tip of my tongue anymore. And that's just a natural part of aging, right? But, I'm getting some benefits as a trade-off for some of those getting older disadvantages. But so looking back on those patterns, I realized that I was collecting books on the learning organization in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, that's always been a real focus of mine, and on human learning. And more lately, I've realized that particularly the work in the software world is shifting from what we've always called knowledge work to much more to learning work. But that's always been my focus. Um, when I really took the dive and said, I'm going to be part of this Agile movement or community or whatever you want to call it, what do I have to offer? Well, I looked back on the things that I had been doing with helping spin up teams and so on, and I realized that um, learning from experience was a central thing. It emphasized in the lean and the well, even before that, the total quality movement and the lean movement and so on, and how important that is. And so I was able to connect with um, Norm Kurth and Esther Derby and some other folks and bring retrospectives and the ideas around retrospectives more present. I mean, I know that there were already people doing some of these things. I wasn't necessarily the only or the first, or neither Esther or I was, but we were among the first to make it really visible and to give it some form. It was interesting to me that of all the different um, methodologies that were included when the Agile Manifesto was written, and the 12th principle talks about reflection and adjusting and making things better. There really wasn't much around a practice for improvement, for learning from experience and then improving our future experience. And so Esther and I put our heads together and came up with the and actually built on. We had a whole community by that time that were the retrospective facilitator gatherings that met once a year and knew each other. And so we, with their help and our own experiences, we were able to pull together the Agile Retrospectives book. Esther was on the Scrum Alliance board at the time, and they totally embraced it. And so it became part of Scrum. And I think whatever my other feelings about Scrum are, I'm very grateful for
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Same. Mm-hmm.
Very grateful for that. How well that was embraced, and though still today there are people who advocate a what they consider a form of retrospectives that I don't think is quite as effective as it could be. Um, it's, still people are out there learning, and that's what's important. That's my biggest thing. And so when I think about that, the learning is in service of optimizing capability in the organization. I really like thinking about people who are working together to get something done. And so organizations are an obvious center for that. So we want to be optimizing the capability of who's there. And to do that, we need to be looking at the environments. How are the environments that they're working in supporting learning? How are the people being supported, the team dynamics, and um, resilience, how they're being treated, psychological safety, and those kinds of things. And then how the leaders are working together. And those for me, those are the three elements that are my focus. That's that's what I'm looking at. And sometimes I'm looking more at leaders and environments. Sometimes I'm looking more at teams, and it sometimes I can't look at all three at once. But those three things are core in everything I've written, it to some degree or another, in a different mix. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally get that. I think there's
Yeah.
a very strong narrative thread, and I think the Agile Retrospectives book, I just want to point out for people, we'll put it in the show notes, like really changed my practice when it came along, and I think still to this day, when we go into an organization, we're looking for feedback loops, we're looking for this, and I'm like, are you doing retros? And it's like, kind of. I mean, it's a kind of a group therapy session, the standard anti-pattern where we get together and we kind of complain for a little bit, we feel get something off our chest, and then we not much happens as a result. And it really seems like a really missed. I'm not saying it's easy to do these well, it isn't, but certainly resources like your book helps. But it's really kind of upsetting that this core feedback loop is broken. It is more of a check-in kind of thing versus a retrospective. I'm just curious, are there like patterns where you see them really being successful or being less effective in organizations, or ways that you kind of work with your clients to help kind of rekindle or get to the value prop of retros as they were intended or as you wrote about back when?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things that go wrong, that don't get the benefit that they could be getting in Agile, are because people don't highlight or understand why we're doing these things, and what benefit are we looking for. And too many things just become, well, we're doing this because it's on the checklist and we need to make a check mark in every one of those items. And that doesn't feed your heart. That that's not inspiring, right? Every practice or every principle on the Agile Manifesto principles page, every practice and every methodology has a why behind it, a benefit that comes along with doing this thing. And if we do it well, and that means it's worth putting in the effort to do it well. Um, and in the Agile Retrospectives book, Esther and I originally, and now with David Horowitz in the second edition, we've doubled down on it, came up with what we call a retrospective framework. Um, and it is a a way of approaching thinking together in a group as a team or as a larger group. I mean, if we're doing release retrospectives or whatever, we might have more than just the development team there. But how do we think together as a group in a way that brings everybody along, so that the decisions we make we don't have to go get buy-in on them later. They've been bought into all the way along because people have been part of the process. And what Esther and I describe is a way that describes how human brains work. And for us as individuals, we think this way very, in seconds, maybe even less than seconds, right? Our attention is drawn to a thing. We perceive some things about it. We decide that, or we unlock in ourselves what we believe the implications are about that. And that leads us to a decision about what we want to do about it. And then we move on, right? If I drop my pen on the floor, oh, my pen went on the floor. Oh, how did I? Okay, well, my hand hit it. I mean, if you think about that, everything you do, every decision you make, and humans are making these decisions all day long, follows that process. So, what we need and what works best, that in my experience, is some group process for a meeting or for a coming together, could be very short, that takes the whole group through that brings we come together, we put our attention on a thing, we find out as much as we can about that thing, what we called gather data. We setting the stage, draw your attention, gather data, learn what we can about it, whether that's hard facts and data or whether that's how we're responding, whatever that might be. And then we generate we know what are the implications of that for us and generate some insights about that. Then we make a decision together because generally the best idea is bubbling up at that point, or at least the one that everybody's willing to support. So it's the best experiment to try because we've got everybody's support for it, right? And we decide how we're gonna take that forward, how we're gonna execute on it, and then we close the meeting, close the retrospective, right? A lot of people come together, say, okay, what did we do well? What do we want to do differently? Is there anybody we want to recognize? Let's go review some of these stories for our backlog.
Right.
And that's the retrospective.
Yep.
And it doesn't result in any improvement. And it doesn't even, it results in some lists that over time people get pretty frustrated by because nothing's happening with them. But it doesn't lead to learning or innovation or team decision making or teams getting better at decision making. One of my favorite stories, I'm not sure if it's in the new second edition or not, but I was at a conference one time in London, and there was a networking meeting the night before for all the speakers, and this young man came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, I don't know if you remember me, but I was in your pre-conference workshop at some conference earlier in the year. And he said, and it was about retrospectives. And he said, so I've been doing retrospective, brought that back to my company, and I've learned the secret. And I said, really? Share it with me, because I thought we were giving you everything. I didn't know we were holding any secrets back. And he said, when you do retrospectives well, or when your retrospectives go well, every other meeting in your organization goes well.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's because people learn to go through that process of thinking about things together, about coming to those conclusions as a group instead of everybody showing up fighting for their own opinion about what should happen. It's a process that brings all those thoughts together. So, that's the question I always ask is, are your retrospectives giving you benefit? And if they're not, why are you doing them?
Yeah.
And if you want those benefits, well, then let's talk about how you might want to approach it differently. Because what you're doing now is kind of a waste of everybody's time. And people know that, and they react about that.
Yeah. It increases, I think, the angst around why are we doing this? I mean, people aren't dummies, right? So they're like, it just kind of increases like process resentment, I might call it, or, even like disenfranchisement. It's like, well, we said this thing is really important, but it doesn't get incorporated in the plan going forward. We really have come down to a retrospective that if you don't gather some insights in the retrospective that affect your plan for the next iteration, then that isn't working. So there's this, I think you touched on the fact that there's this connection effect between practices, and it kind of thus formeth a system, you know. um I okay, so okay, here's something. A lot of our clients have jettisoned some of their quote unquote agile roles or even delivery roles. Like Scrum Master feels a bit like it's on the decline, as a role. And a lot of, good Scrum Masters are moving on to other different, roles in product management or even sometimes like engineering, product ops, stuff like that. But it, it, one of the questions that comes up with these clients is like, we can't really have the rigor of process before because we don't have someone that's kind of minding the process. Like, and I kind of see as someone that is a, kind of a Jedi level facilitator and stuff like that. Like, where are we supposed to find the people to do this stuff if, we flattened out that side of the org? Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Well, and I was amused by all the announcements from organizations that were, oh, well, we're going to lay off all of our agile coaches because managers should really be doing that job. They're going to be the coaches.
Right.
And who's teaching the managers to do that? To be team coaches on top of
Yeah.
everything else that they've been doing and all the other things that are on their plate. I mean, if you've got people who have that natural tendency, good for you. And if you've hired for that, good for you. But many organizations have hired for that. They've hired for people who are really good at filling out the paperwork that goes along with being a manager and reporting to HR and, all those things, which are not the same skills that nurturing teams includes. And that's one of the reasons that that Trisha and I wrote the Lead Without Blame book, was to sort of give some guidance to people who are in those leadership management/leadership roles on what are some things that you can be doing to not become a coach, but to be, again, creating that environment where your teams can perform well. Put your attention there. Take your attention off performance reviews and put your attention on what conditions need to be present for people to perform well together, and make sure that all of those are in place. And then you'll get the outputs and outcomes and impacts that you want. But, just telling people, oh, you're not working up to snuff is not good coaching.
Yeah.
And it's not good team development. And,
Yeah.
it doesn't get the benefits and the outcomes that we're looking for. So, yeah, I used to be part of a consulting group called FutureWorks Consulting, and I had a partner in that. And we were working on our website at one point. And one of the things we were trying to do was help to describe each other for the website, so that we could, do an about us page or something like that. And she looked at me and she said, I don't know whether I should characterize you as a pragmatic visionary or a visionary pragmatist. And I think that's a factor in what you're describing about how I work with people. I am very focused on results. I am
Yeah.
very practical. I want to see the outcomes that accomplish the things that we want to accomplish. Absolutely. But I also want to be open-minded to the potential of the situation and thinking about what new things are out there that we might want to incorporate, and where are we all headed with this? What do we want? What is our vision for the future, and what is going to be the best pathway to get there? And so, that combination of benefits and results is like hugely important to me. And I think that's a piece of it. So when you can find somebody who has, and I'm not the only one out there that has that combination, but when you can find somebody who has that combination, I think you're going to find someone who's more likely to be able to help you accomplish the things you want to accomplish by attending to the things that a lot of people don't want to attend to. You were a part of a research project that James Shore and I did many years ago, where we interviewed CTOs and CIOs about what your work life was like. That was a really fun project. I realize it was a lot longer ago than I originally had thought it was, but what's interesting to me about it was a couple of the outcomes that were not the same for every single person, but that were very strong across the whole group. And one was how much people were struggling with what got characterized as emotional baggage for the people that they were whose work lives they had control over, and then their own responsibilities to their peers, their peer leaders. And and it and while we talked a lot about technologies and, organizational structures and, all these other things, those two pieces, the human elements,
Yeah.
came through so strongly. And the need to be able to, I don't know if I want to use the word cope or manage or resolve or transcend. I'm not sure. But to recognize it and as part of the work and find ways of responding to it that made things better for everybody, including the people we were interviewing. And so I think about that, all the time when I'm doing my work. It's like things just go so much easier if we have good, productive working relationships. I mean, achievement is a human need. We all want to accomplish things to some one. I mean, my drive may be stronger than some people's, but everybody wants to feel pride in their work, and so to the degree to which we can facilitate that, the better.
Yeah. It just yeah, I think you nailed it. The where I see the gaps is really in development, and kind of nurturing, developing people, challenging them sometimes, helping them deal with, I mean, being a people manager is a really hard job. It's every employee has 1.5 personal crises a month, something like that, right? Some whatever 80% of stats are made up on the
Yeah.
spot, but something crazy like that. And it's just true. It's human nature. It's
Yeah.
messy, right? And
Right.
and but yeah, where we see it's like, wow, what you took away in terms of capability should have been shifted to another role or another area, and that never really happened. It just seems like there's over reliance on tools. It feels like many pendulums are swinging back a little bit these days toward pre-agile thought, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, just one more thing on that. It is remarkable to me the extent to which humans, and particularly humans in our field, think that they are going to solve human problems, relationship problems, um, uh, you know, uh, cooperation problems, whatever, with a new tool.
Yeah,
The new tool's going to fix it,
sure.
as opposed to us getting better
Hmm.
at at how. I mean, I don't expect any person to become a better human. They are the human they are,
Yeah,
but they might benefit by having some additional techniques or tools, or seeing somebody else model some behavior that they can experiment with themselves, or those kinds of things. And I think that becomes really important.
totally. It's kind of the practices layer above the tools that I think, just to keep harping on XP was so strong at. It's not the tool, it's how you hold it. It's like, it's how you gather around it. It's like those are the more meaningful things. The tool, is valuable at some point. I mean,
Hmm.
it's good to have data and stuff like that. I think I'd love to ask you about your work in team chartering and kind of team startups, the liftoff era, and essentially it's about team chartering and that emphasizing the power of shared purpose and alignment. How has your thinking about team startups and charters evolved since you wrote that? Is that something you still are kind of engaged with?
Yeah, I'm still engaged with it. Actually, I kind of re-engaged with it over the last couple of years. A young man he probably doesn't think of himself that way, but I do because I'm old, uh, who lives in the UK, contacted me and talked about his excitement about his discovery around liftoffs and what Ainsley Lease and I called liftoffs and team chartering. And it's an old idea. It's been around a long time. I learned it from my mentors in the 80s. And they had learned it from somebody before that. So it's not that it's such a new idea that if you take the time at the beginning, when you first bring people together for a shared effort, to give them some basic information about it, that it really does accelerate their ability to perform. It helps them move into productive mode more quickly and so on. And so uh, I mean, we've Neil Taylor is the name of the person, and he has been working very hard. He turns to me occasionally with, you know, some kinds of questions, but he's become so embedded in this that he's just become so brilliant about it. That he and I are doing a workshop in November, two virtual half days on team liftoffs, and there is a website now, teamliftoffs.com. So that's the latest evolution in the liftoff world. We wrote a second edition. Ainsley and I wrote a second edition that came out in 2016. It didn't really include a lot of stuff about remote teams and so on. So people have been sort of figuring that out on their own. And so that's the kind of the new horizon that Neil and I are looking at in terms of that work. It's like, how do we meet the moment today in terms of purpose? What's the vision for the product? What kind of work are we going to do? That piece of it, alignment. Who are the people who are going to do the work? How are they going to work together? What are their initial agreements about that? And the context that they're in. Are they, what about their environment is going to be supportive to them? What do they need to be prepared for that may not support them so well? What kind of interactions do they have to have outside their team? Those kinds of, that sort of contextual uh, information. Having those three pieces of information when you first start a piece of work is hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
And and it also works really well if once you kind of have a draft of that, or even if you don't, when teams are thrashing and need a restart. You just need to hit the restart button and hold a lift off and help them kind of refigure it out or figure it out for the first time a lot. Or when new people join the team to be able to bring them up to speed very quickly. So it has a lot of utility in terms of team performance, and it takes a tiny fraction of the
Yeah.
whole time that the team will be together to do that right in the beginning, particularly for remote teams. If you can, bring them together co-located then
Right.
for the liftoff, for the chartering, so they can get to know each other in a deeper way. And that will then last when they're virtual. That will then stick with them when they're working, when they will already know how tall, I will already know how tall David is when I see him in his thumbnail because I've seen him in real life in person. I know his preference for coffee over tea or, whatever it might be because we spent some time together. And humanizing each other helps us to work together so much better. And helps to build psychological safety and all those other good dependability. We know we want to be dependable for each other because now we know each other in a different way. So yeah, so that's still, that's still one of those, the environment, the team, and the leadership
Yeah. Yep.
optimizing capability. That's still my focus, but that's just through a different lens of how we get started, how the liftoff goes. Yeah,
Yeah. The strength to the, I don't know what you call it, the power to effort ratio or impact to effort ratio for this practice is really good. And, one thing I kind of think of too is I love what you said about the dependability or the kind of accountability to each other. Putting this stuff external makes it non-arbitrary in a way that, like, as a manager or a coach or, someone that's doing the activity of coaching, whatever that is, you can say, hey, it seems like we're getting a little bit far from this. Or does that mean we change our charter or do we change our
yeah,
behavior, and you can just have that more candid conversation because we agreed to this and it's not like compliance, but it is, oh, well, it seems like we're not fully aligned. Let's get things aligned, whether it's us or the document, but yeah, we do all of our gigs. We start with a version of this and we really encourage people to do it periodically or like you said, event driven, as key events change the nature of the team or its work or something like that, just revisit this and tune it up a little bit.
yeah, yeah. One of my tenets, Ainsley's and my tenets in the book is, and that I use when I'm working with organizations, is it's always a draft. It's a draft until the team or the project disbands.
Right.
Right? It's always in draft. And so it's always available to be adjusted when conditions change. But we need something as a reference point along the way.
Right.
And so we create that initial draft charter, and then we can just look at pieces of it. We never have to do the whole thing all over again. And it's such a wonderful investment of time and effort, and it really pays off in huge
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
Awesome. Back to the retrospective talk too. I think these two things work really well together.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like when we have an action on the retro, or we're going to try to work a certain way or adopt a certain work agreement or collaboration contract for a month. Okay, let's
Yeah.
retro on that. And maybe that goes into the charter. I don't
Yeah.
know, like there's this,
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's kind of the team's
Mm-hmm.
way.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing too is we like try to get the leadership teams to do this as well. So we try to kind of have them model because they're a team, it's just a team of
Yes.
C-level people, right? And they're working together and, they've got different set of concerns and different flight level, but still they need to operate in this way. They have goals, they have working agreements, and they want to probably refine those over time. So
Yeah.
let's put it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So next topic I wanted to kind of cover you is like around leadership and the human
Mm-hmm.
side of change. A lot of your recent work, we had a chance to catch up before this, and you were saying is kind of rooms of leaders and the work, kind of moving toward working with leadership as a lever for change, and as you as a change agent, the audience that can help you make that change, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see the
Yeah.
role of leadership changing in today's like complex, adaptive, crazy market dynamics? Organizations, like what's changed about leadership that you can see?
I'm not, that's a hard question because I think really good leadership has been, has had a similar look and feel to the people around it
Yeah.
for a very long time. I mean, Douglas McGregor in 1952 or 53 wrote a book called Theory X, Theory Y. And it was about the contrast of outcomes and impact that his research showed from leaders and managers who were Theory X, which is people come to work because they have to. They can't live without it, and they wouldn't, if they wouldn't show up if they're essentially lazy, and they wouldn't show up at all if they didn't have to. And so we need to be ready to punish them and, crack the whip whenever it's needed to keep them going, because otherwise they'll slack off and they'll sandbag the work and they'll, all that stuff. So there's that whole set of ways of being a leader. And unfortunately, that kind of has been perpetuated in a whole bunch of ways in our society. And he contrasted that with Theory Y leaders, who he said, these are the folks who understand that everybody comes to work wanting to do a good job. They may encounter some barriers to that when they get there, but most folks want to do a good job and are eager to learn how to be better at it, get the feedback they need to do more and improve themselves, improve their work, maybe get promotions. That's all a part of it, right? And that's really his thesis was that's really where most people come from, and leaders who recognize that get the most out of their people. Well, in recent years, or more recently than 52, there has been a academic theory base called self-determination theory, which is about people working autonomously, making their own choices about their work lives and so on. And there are subsets of that big theory. I mean, it's huge. That's a huge topic. And there are subsets of that. And one of them is about leading people who are, working more in a self-organizing way. Right? Self-determination theory is about self-organizing in groups.
Mhm.
And out of that has come this contrast between the controlling dominant leader and the autonomy supporting leader, right? And it's back to Douglas McGregor. And it wasn't new when he recognized it. He
Right.
just described it, right? So this isn't new, but it seems new because we keep defaulting the other way. We keep thinking we have to pressure people, we have to threaten people if we want them to do good. Their natural inclination is
Right.
to do the wrong thing and be completely self-serving and lazy and, just on and on. Depending on your worldview, you're going to ascribe to one of those or the other. My personal opinion is that the Theory Y autonomy supportive leader who helps people self-organize their work, so you're getting those decisions about the work being made closest to where the most information about the work is present and available, and which brings you better results. I mean, that Deming weighed in on this as well. I mean, you look at a lot of the great management theorists; they're all skew much more toward Theory Y. Um, and um, and so that's kind of where I sit. And so that's the things that I gather are intended to help people move that forward. And so what I have been doing is I go to organizations. Sometimes I just talk with one group in an organization. Sometimes I'm there for a day or a day and a half, and I talk with groups that are leaders all at the same kind of either in the same department or same level in the organization about the challenges that they are facing and what they, how what new ideas are out there that can be helpful to them, or new ways of reframing some of the things that they're encountering, so that they can be more accessible for them to figure out and work with. So, so that's been a really joyful part of my work lately, because through that what I've realized is that the number of, with all this sort of downsizing and what the plate of every manager and leader in an organization just gets fuller and fuller, and nothing ever gets taken off. And if any of us who've been to a picnic and get a paper plate know there's only so much you can put
Right.
on it
Right.
before it collapses and all the food goes on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And that's, it's a recipe for burnout. It's a recipe for unhappiness and confusion. All the food gets mixed together, right?
Yeah.
So, so I want to. I have the luxury, having been a consultant and a coach and a mentor and all these years. Um, I show up to a lot of conferences. I have arranged my life so I get to spend a lot of my time learning and being aware of new things that are going on out there. So many managers, their plates are so full, they never get a chance to look up
Yep.
and see what else is going on around them before they bump into the person who makes them spill their plate, right? Whatever that is. That analogy is probably over now, but
Yeah.
but but I can do that. And so I can be kind of a messenger from the outside world to say, hey, have you heard about this? This is a thing that some people are experimenting with, and it's helping them a lot in this particular area that you're really struggling with. And here's some places you can go to learn about it. Here's a couple of people you could talk to. I can bring those things.
Yeah.
And I can sit with people on an ongoing basis to do that. Like just to have regular conversations about how things are going. And I'm not a therapist and I'm not a coach in that sense,
Yay.
but
Thank you.
but
Very
but I
good.
can but I can serve an advisory role that
Yeah.
way. And I can advise as a big group or I could advise for individuals. And that, with the time of life that I'm in right now, that seems to match my ability to put in energy and effort. And so I'm really enjoying that work.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great to see
Yeah.
you doing it. I wonder, so we talk a lot about in our teams at Nerd Noir, we talk about like what are the meta outcomes? Like what okay, sure, this team has learned this practice and they're getting some benefit, but we talk about like the meta outcomes of, will they, when we leave, continue to experiment on that practice or find other new, will they make it
Yeah.
their own? Will they do that? And that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're trying to point at is like,
Yeah.
yes, we can teach you how to play with something and find the value of it, but we're much more interested in you becoming, right sizing your experimentalism. You know what I mean? And
Right.
being
Right.
more
Right.
open to try things and fail and creating of that nurturing of that environment. I think you use the term gardener, right? Kind of
Yeah.
creating the conditions where
Right.
those behaviors will emerge on their own without us having to suggest
Right.
things. Although you do have to prime that pump, often,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
just good, get good external validation. We might be doing something right, Diana. I gotta say.
Yeah.
So anyway, uh,
That's awesome. Yeah.
yeah. So we can talk about this. We don't have to. I thought the fast stuff was kind of interesting. If you don't want
Oh,
to talk,
yeah.
I mean, if you want
No,
to,
I can talk. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I came across. I think one of our collaborators, this guy Matt Plavkin, who's a mutual of ours, turned us
Yeah.
on to the fast framework. We don't really do it. We're pretty, we call like
Yeah.
non-dogmatic. We're pretty like, well, what do you got? Let's tune that up kind of firm. But it is kind of interesting in that it seems to be quite the opposite
Yeah.
of some other larger, more
Yeah.
established
Right.
Agile frameworks that we
Yeah.
can mention or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. No,
People can
not.
use their,
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Fluid
I'd love
adaptive scaling technology.
fluid adaptive
Fluid adaptive scaling
scaling
technology.
technology fast. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Tell us a little bit about, can you give us the value prop and the,
Yeah.
the elevator pitch for,
Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I can give the elevator pitch, but I can give you mine. Um, it's been a delight for me to watch this emerge over the last 8 or 10 years. Um, a, a wonderful practitioner leader named Quentin Cortell um, came to a couple of open space events that were conferences. There's one we do in bounces back and forth between Portland and Seattle called Agile Open Northwest. The Agile Opens happen all around the country. There's one that was in Atlanta that I know Quentin went to. And he had this idea of like, well, this open space thing, this is kind of interesting. I wonder what that would look like applied to software development, work process. And so he started noodling on that. And after a few years, he kept noticing some different things like that. Oh, team self-selection. I wonder how that would fit into blah, 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 dynamic reteaming. I wonder how that would fit into, and he's an XP person. So he was already thinking in terms of slicing the work small and, doing a lot of those other things. And for me, it's like he took all the things that I love most about being in the Agile community and mashed them up and said, here's a way we can scale up or scale down, which often gets ignored, the need for sometimes doing that, for how we do our work and keep everybody in alignment along the way and knowing what the purpose of the work is and so forth and so on. So anyway, there is a fastagile.io is a website that for people can look at to get more information. There's a Slack channel. There's some other supporting materials. But it's being experimented on with in a number of different organizations. And the general idea is somebody comes up with a great idea for a product. They really want a group of people to work on this product. They know what they can describe it. They know what it is. And they bring together a group of people that represents all the skills and abilities and backgrounds and whatever, the great diversity of that is going to be required to get this done. And sometimes it requires some redundancy. Maybe just not one developer is going to be enough. Maybe we need 10, who knows? And that group comes together on a cadence, whether it's every 2 or 3 days, every week, whatever it is. That group comes together on a cadence. They look at the work. There's some conversations that happen, kind of like in an open space. People say, well, I see this part of it that needs to be done. And some other people say, I see this part of it needs to be done first. And I see this part and this part. We need to nail these down first. And then the whole group of people say, oh, well, my effort would be best spent on that part of it. And my effort would be best spent. And so they self-organize themselves into smaller teams. And then they go away and they work just for a couple of days, no more than a week, maybe just a day. I mean, whatever. I know a number of organizations that are doing a 2-day and then a 3-day, so it fits within the week. Others do a 2-day, 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 or whatever. But it has to be small chunks because at the end of that time, they come back together. They show what they've built. They figure out how it needs to integrate, if it needs to integrate, if they're done or if they're not done, what remains to be done, those kinds of things. And then okay, now that means we've got this thing that needs to be done and this thing that needs to be done. And they reconfigure themselves. Generally, once people pick a certain stream, they'll stay with that certain stream until that one gets done. But it doesn't have to be that way. People who are a scarcer resource may decide they want to hop around. Maybe they're the sole person who really understands the database, so they need to be available. But this is a way to make them available to multiple teams without it being a huge disruption. And And there's some wonderful like graphic illustrations of this.
Yeah, it's
But
really beautiful.
and
I mean, the
it's
graphics are
really
amazing.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the graphics are
yeah.
made. Per Benning from Denmark is the one who's created that. It's just really gorgeous. Um, but that's the gist of it. It's this cadence of selecting what I believe is the best place for me to do my work now, having a clear idea of the vision of the work that we're heading toward, knowing that when I am no longer needed here or I can't learn anymore from doing this part of the work, I can go over and contribute in a different way and in a different place. And and so everybody is fully utilized all the time without being assigned to multiple projects. Oh, you're 60% on this and you're 30% on that. And oh, the remaining 10%, we want you to go and devote yourself entirely to this other thing. Nobody's nobody's brain works that way, right? And so there's a lot of with that kind of multitasking, there's a lot of wasted time and effort. But with fast, you get the good parts of that. If you need people in different places for different amounts of time, you get that. But it's done in a way that is triggered by people's understanding of the work and just being able to smoothly make those adjustments about where they need to be and what they need to be doing and the product owner, product manager, whatever, whatever title that person who brought that product vision to begin with, if they change their ideas about what that vision is, they have an easy way of communicating that.
Yep,
Now that we've put this into the hands of the customers, we've discovered that, oh, this one part we thought that was going to be really important, they don't care about, but they are loving this. So let's double down on this,
yep, yep.
and, being able to do that, not having to wait to the end of the quarter for the next PI plan. Sorry. Um, yeah, no, that's too late.
Yeah,
Let's make that learning. Again, this is back to learning. It's another thing I love about this is people are learning all the time in this process that, let's apply the learning that we get right away. So yeah, I'm very high on fast. I think it's going to be a very interesting coming thing. I can't wait to hear about more experiments. I don't right now haven't been working with organizations that are have the conditions where that can happen, but I'm paying a lot of attention to the ones who are able to apply it and implement it because I think it's got huge potential. Yeah.
yeah. It's worth looking at. I think
Yeah.
I think there's a lot you can learn just kind of by studying it. I think reverse engineering, and it's been a minute since I've looked at it, but the having as good technical practices, technical technology backbone would be good. Good like run books, good minimum viable
Right.
documentation, good test
Right.
suites, like up to date dependencies, like not having
Yeah.
a ton of tech debt. I think, or well managed tech debt would be a kind of one of the prereqs to be able to swap
Yeah.
around to teams. Having
Yeah.
some consistency of practice, just a measure of that, would seem to be like another condition you'd want. So it's you're not having to learn a whole new way of life every time you kind of flip, but also
Well,
minimizing your process
right.
too, so you don't
Well,
have ton of, you know.
right. Well, and that can happen as part of the chartering. You know
Yeah, there
what
you go.
what collective coding standards do we want to agree on?
Sure. Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
what but I mean all of those kind of collective agreements can be determined up front or at a reset. Oops, we thought this was going to work, but it's turning out it's not. You've got every couple of days an opportunity to adjust that. And that, I mean, I just think it's remarkable. So I give a lot of the credit, if maybe not 100%, but I give a lot of the credit to Quentin Cortell for really codifying this, really coming up with the idea and then getting a bunch of the rest of us excited
Yeah.
about it and sharing it with us, and you know people are out there doing it now, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're getting close here. I would love to just kind of know like what questions you're personally exploring these days, or problems or things that you're thinking about,
Oh,
maybe haven't
yeah,
haven't quite solved for yourself.
right. Oh, that's interesting because I have been thinking about that. This next weekend, I fly off to Pennsylvania to attend an event that was the event that actually introduced me to Agile in 1997, called the Consultants Retreat and Network.
Okay.
And it's a time where folks like us get together and sort of say, how are things going? And so I'm preparing myself to be able to go and have that conversation. But um, I'm very curious now, and I'm actually have reached out for a coach for myself about how best at this point in my career to serve my community. What, what are what and how are the best ways for me to continue to contribute? Contribution has been a huge part of my life. I It was instilled in me by my grandmother. We're all put on this earth for a purpose. Figure out what yours is and go for it, right? And so I that that's that making that contribution to the world has always been a big part of why I do what I do. And and as my stages of my life keep changing, I keep encountering, well, okay, what now? And so I'm thinking a lot about that. I mean, part of the answer so far has been what I described about how I'm working with leaders now. Um, I suspect that there is more or different that I could do there. Certainly, I think there's more or different that I could do to communicate that to people. I've never been a great marketer, and so I'm trying to learn some better marketing.
I
That's
I
not,
hear you.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have problems, telling people about what I can do and that I can do it. It's not like I'm a shrinking violet, but I just there are just techniques that I don't have time for or would prefer to spend my time differently or whatever. So I'm getting some coaching with that. So that's a
Nice.
question I'm looking at. I People keep asking me if I'm going to retire or if I have retired, and it's like I love the work I do. I love the work I've always been doing. I love this community. It's been so good to me, and it continues to be when I go traveling or whatever. I meet people everywhere that are just like already we're friends. The friends I haven't met yet, like the Muppets say, right?
Yep.
And and so I don't I don't know why I would want to stop doing this to do something called retired. So I guess in my retirement project is to keep doing the thing I've always been doing.
Work-life balance is
And
for
so looking,
plebes. Yeah.
yeah, and for
Yeah.
looking for
Yeah.
more opportunities to do it.
Yep.
I had a
Yep.
great opportunity the other day. I wrote about it on LinkedIn. I visited this company that has this amazing new technology, and they showed me around their place, and they showed me all the machines and told me a little bit about the different kinds of folks who are their customers, and it was fascinating. And I love doing that, and I'd love to do more of that. And then maybe do a quid pro quo of, let me see that and give me a little bit of money, and then I'll come and tell you, my questions about what you're doing, and tell you what I've learned about other places that are doing something similar. And um so, I just feel figuring out how to kind of keep that going is and stay healthy. is that becomes a big concern once you pass a certain age. So you just to stay healthy and fit enough to keep doing the things you love to do. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that's always on my mind.
Well, I love that you're continuing to do
Yeah.
it. I think you've made a significant impact in my professional life, and I'm sure many, many, many others. So I think it's in our best interest to keep you employed, with gigs. So anyway,
Thank you.
I want to gonna plug Dinah Larsen, everyone. Go,
Yeah.
I'll put in the show notes how to get in touch with her. Read one of her. She's written a ton of books with some great people. It's core to the community. If you don't know, now you know, and I think you probably do know, but just in case you didn't, now you do.
Thank you, David.
You bet.